I'm going to be sharing a little bit around the energy of money and how you can maximize your return on investment. This is probably a topic we've never really covered too much, but money has a specific energy. So I'm going to share a little bit around how energy flows where focus goes, or energy goes where focus flows. We're going to come talk to you about one of my mentors' concepts called the Wealth Lighthouse, and how you can actually, to be honest, I took the Wealth Lighthouse and I turned it into the Wealth Ladder to make it simpler for people to understand. However, the Wealth Lighthouse itself is actually more about energy and connection and consciousness than it is actually about wealth. So we're going to talk about that and how you are showing up, and also really reconnecting back into the cash flow quadrant. And Greg, this sort of comes back to what we were talking about before. It's only once times got tough, or what does Warren Buffett say? It's once the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked, right? And okay, we're starting to see a few naked bums. We're seeing a lot of naked bums out in the general public, right? But we're starting to see a few naked bums around Wealth Mentor, and it's like, okay, well, is this because you actually transitioned to the right-hand side and you became? Remember, we talk about becoming an investor. Or is it because you simply bought a few houses and you focused on the have of having some properties? Remember Zig Ziglar, B times do equals have, but a lot of people just focusing on what they want to have rather than who they have to become in order to do it. So I'm going to share a few stories today from my time. I haven't been able to, we grow when we push ourselves past our comfort zone, and there've definitely been some massive losses and some massive learning curves that I've had to endure throughout my career too. One of the things that I did, and I wouldn't call it smart, I wouldn't call it dumb, it's just that it was what it was. Learn the lessons, take the loss, move on. Was in 2017, I sold up a large chunk of my portfolio, and not knowing what I was doing, I invested in Genius Group. Now, Genius Group, it's run by my mentor. They were listing on the stock exchange. I actually first invested in Entrepreneur Resorts. That listed on the Seychelles Stock Exchange almost immediately, but there was no liquidity. And so when they decided to roll it into the group listing on the New York Stock Exchange, I was extremely excited to be able to say that I turned a few $100,000 into $1 million, and then almost overnight, shares dropped from $30 all the way to $5, and then got down, as we can see, as low as 33 cents. And to this day, that those hundreds of thousands of dollars that I invested into here are worth just minuscule compared to what I invested. And that was hard. That was a really hard lesson, really hard hit that I had to take. Second biggest loss of my life was Muriwai, of my investing career, was I've shared this before, doing the tiny house village. My goal is how can I stop people working? My personal goal, right? I don't believe people should have to work shit jobs in order to survive. Fair enough? It's modern day slavery, right? So I don't believe you should have to work shit jobs in order to survive. So through buying Wealth Mentor, yeah, it's how we make wealth accessible to all and how we give the education side. But in my personal investing, I'm now trying to use physical real estate to help remove the cost of living for people. And so I discovered that by utilizing tiny houses, solar, atmospheric water generators, by growing food on site, permaculture, food forests, syntropic agriculture, vertical farming, those types of strategies, we could almost rethink how we live to completely or majoritively remove the cost of living. And then my goal was, okay, if you don't have to work, what would you do with your life? And we see what happens, right? We see the likes of, Belinda and Stephen and Helen and the mentors, when you don't have to work to live, you actually do things that make you come alive. And that's exciting. That's the world I want to live in, where people are alive, they're happy, they're doing things they want to live. They're not stuck in a shit job like like some zombie, just like getting a paycheck after paycheck after paycheck. And so I bought this piece of land out in Muriwai to do a tiny house village right before COVID hit. And then the council were a bunch of fucking assholes, to put it lightly, to use nice words. And it all got so hard, I ended up having to sell it. And I ended up taking a $300,000 loss. And I remember sitting there when I realized I was trapped. I realized the vendor's lawyer had done a bloody good job, and I ended up trapped. And I was like a possum in the headlights, right? When you know how you get the brain fog, like you can't see anything else, and it's almost like, you know, the blinkers come in, and all you can think is those. Oh, we're recording. Those motherfuckers, those motherfucking bitch, you know, all the swear words, it's their fault. They've screwed me, they've ripped me off, those fucking pricks. And then I'm speaking to my mentor, and I'm still going like, you know, how could they screw me over like this? And he's like, Kyron, it's only $300,000. I'm going, yeah, easy for you to say. I'm the one who's taking the hit. And he's like, but don't you have like a $300 million vision? I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, so what's 300,000? That's like 0.1%. And I'm like, okay. He's like, would you invest 0.1% of your end vision in learning costs in order to get to your goal? And I was like, well, yeah, obviously I've already invested that, right? And he's like, okay, so suck it up and move on. I'm sitting there going like, you know, easy for you to say, but the minute I realized it was only going to be the minute I had a number, right? And I knew what that loss was going to be, and then I was able to accept it. I was able to come up with a new determination of how I could, okay, how am I going to make that back? And we went from that into a development in Paihia, which is going to make $10 million. So $300,000 loss into $10 million, right? Not too bad. Going to take time, but it means I've never actually taken the physical loss. It's still sitting there on paper, but there's a particular energy that goes with it. And so this is where I want to share with you the concept that came through. This is what led to the wealth ladder. But this is my mentor, Roger Hamilton. This is his wealth lighthouse. And each of these colors represent a different energy. Now, if I walk backwards through this, I'm going to skip through these to orange level. This is what most of us know. This is where I go to work. It's employment. I work hard. I make money. That's what life is. I earn a salary. What Wealth Mentor has done with the mentorship is we have taught you indirectly how to go from orange level to yellow level. Yellow level is where you are able to make your own money. And you do that through buying property, through flipping property, through having investments, all those sides of things, right? And this is essentially where you no longer have to simply show up and work for someone else. You are now active, and you are now playing in the market yourself. You are the one, and that's why it's called player, right? You are the one playing within the market yourself. But the thing about it is, when you're out playing in the market, you no longer have someone else looking out for you. So it's your job, in order to keep an eye out what's happening in the market, in order to know what's happening in the economic side, which is why we do Property Live every year, right? Which is why I say this is your annual learning, what you should be doing to stay up to date. But this is now and I love that Stephen calls it a business, because it absolutely is. It is your property business. So it's your responsibility to ensure that you are still, and literally, if you come down here, how do I stay here? Master your market. It's your job to know what's happening in the market, who your competitors are, what properties are going for, what rents are going for, what's happening with interest rates, what's likely to happen with interest rates. And then monetizing your moment is how you're actually making money with your strategy. And when things change, you still have to stay on top of it. You still need to be monetizing your moment. Now, we can climb up levels, and we can also climb down levels, right? And if we take a quick look, this is now green level. This is where you go from playing, where you are the one doing all the work, to starting to build out a team. Now, the great thing about property is it's really easy to build out a team. But what's even cooler is we've started to see a lot of our people, a lot of our students be able to step up to the point where they're turning their investing into a business, hiring new people and really specializing in on one area. We've heard from Lisa and Nigel how they do that. They've now got the renovation business. We've got Matt Perks, who's created a development and building company. Even right down to what we do here at Wealth Mentor, where we've taken it and said, well, how can we actually build out a team and of mentors in order to go out and teach new people as well, right? Where it's no longer just us having to be the one-on-one person running around trying to do all the marketing, all that. We all specialize in one area, and we let the rest of the team what they do best at. So just as you can climb up, you can also slide down the ladder as well. And that's what that's what happened to me when I end up losing that money. This is when we start talking about personal, right? When we look at your personal situation, if you're not paying attention, not knowing better, or you're not in charge of your own flow, you end up in infrared. And we're seeing a number of people out in the market like this right now, where they are in negative cash flow. They are starting to pay more money. Well, they're negatively geared, but some people are even dipping into savings. And if we have a look at the emotions, struggle, blame, and denial, this is the victim. This is exactly where I was when I stretched myself a bit too thin. I took on a deal that I probably wasn't quite prepared for. And then when I got caught out, I blamed everybody but myself, right? But the thing about this is very easy to get rid of, right? All you have to do is get rid of whatever it is that's actually draining you of your cash flow, and then you can move up to the next level. And how do we get here? Commit to conduct. This is one of the things that you've heard repetitively. How do you connect in? How do you reconnect? And when we talk about reconnection, we talk about it in a number of ways. Reconnect with your community, which is what we are. Reconnect with your network, which is what Property Club is. Reconnect with your mentors, or reconnect with your vision, your why. Have you reconnected with your reason for getting started in property in the first place? Because once you reconnect, it's like electricity, right? This power plug by itself does absolutely nothing. My screen's sitting here, not turned on. The minute I connect it into electricity, all of a sudden there's flow. There are electrons flowing, the screen lights up, and all of a sudden it's useful, right? And it's exactly the same as us. When we plug into the right community, when we plug back into our why, then we're now connected, we light up, and we've actually got a reason for being again as well. So if we're focusing on that point of view, we can actually start looking at, sometimes it's a smart decision to take a loss within your portfolio if it helps you to move on, because the worst thing you can do is be stuck in that infrared or red mindset, because that's ultimately what holds you back. We've seen Lisa and Nigel be able to go out and buy a number of deals whilst a lot of people have been stuck, whereas, they sucked it up. They took that $500,000 hit and they were able to move on. I sucked it up. I took a $300,000 hit, and I was able to reinvest the rest of my money to make more money, because I look at what is my desired ROI. I asked all of you yesterday, what is that minimum return on your investment that you're willing to accept? And how often are you actually checking in on your portfolio to ensure if your entire portfolio is delivering that return on investment? Because if it's not, then you might need to be making some tweaks within your portfolio. There's even Feasty touched on it before. I don't like selling, but why don't you like selling? If you are constantly making your money work as hard as possible, you should be more than happy to sell, only if you can put your money into something which is going to work harder for you, right? And this is that conversation we had with Torb yesterday. If he was to sell and reinvest into something to make his money work harder, he could be making $600,000 passive income per year. And Torb, I did see your question. We will touch on IAW and the wealth games a little bit later. But for some of you, you'll be asking, well, should I sell? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe the market will correct. But you can do some simple numbers, right? If you're negative right now, well, how much are you willing to lose, or how much are you going to lose in negative cash flow over the next 24 months? If you are minus $20,000 per year, then you're going to lose $40,000 over the next month. So therefore, if you were to sell right now and take a $40,000 hit, well, you're exactly the same position now as you would be in 24 months. The only difference is you've freed up a whole heap of cash, and you can now go and invest that at your desired ROI. For example, when Torb said 15%, well, you would now be 30% up from where you would be in 24 months' time if you just held on to that property at that negative rate. You need the growth to more than make up, not just stabilize, but more than make up to how much it's fallen by because of the negative cash flow that you're actually paying out. So if you do the numbers, and you can do this quite easily, if you do the numbers of how long it's going to take you in order to rebuild back up, not to get ahead, but just to where you were, you will find that most of the time, you're probably better up selling those unperforming assets and reinvesting back into something that is performing, because then you're going to either get the next amount of growth spurt, or you're going to be able to compound your returns over the next couple of years going forward. So if you were to cash up and you were to receive that desired ROI that you were looking for, then what would your total capital look like over the next 24 months? And compare that against the negative cash flow. That's going to allow you to weigh up the two very easily. A lot of people come through and they get stuck in indecision. But indecision is a decision in itself. It's a decision not to make a decision. And so you can simply put a time frame on when you are going to make that decision. This is, again, what Belinda said yesterday. Okay, but when are you going to do that action? So when is it that you're going to make that decision, whether you sell or whether you hold, and then just be happy with that decision you've made and keep trudging forward towards reaching your actual goal. Another question that's been coming through is, should I pay off my mortgage? Some people are sitting on cash and saying, well, should I pay off my mortgage? Obviously, I asked Brendan this question yesterday, and he said, no, don't do it. The easiest way is to look at what your current interest rate is, right? I did some quick maths. So again, going to interest.co.nz, if you were to leave it in savings in a term deposit, you're getting about 5.55%. If you were to pay off your mortgage, you'd be getting 6.69%, right? And you'd be saving yourself 6.969%. So it looks better. But you don't have to pay off your mortgage. You can simply put it in a revolving credit or put it in an offset account where you're now saving that interest. But again, if you come back to your desired ROI and you know there are strategies or other investments that you could invest into, which are returning more than 6.69%, which we know is possible because half the people in this room have either done IAW or have at least invested in something which returns a greater than 6.69% return, then you're actually smarter, and Feasty touched on this, you're smarter just going and investing in something that's going to make more money than the actual interest that the interest that you're paying, because you're making more money from investing in something else. This is what it means to think like an investor, and this is why you look at your portfolio as a whole and not just each individual property. So utilizing an offset account or restructuring your debt into a revolving credit facility will allow you to save on your interest, and it's a lot better than simply paying down the mortgages. But if you can be looking at what else you can invest in, and we'll touch on that in a minute too. But this is also where you should be doing an annual review on your entire portfolio, because capital is growing, interest, your returns are doubling. If you're not taking that money out, well, you don't always know what an entire portfolio looks like. And so if you if you take a look at your portfolio and you look at what is my total amount of equity, the entire portfolio as a whole, and what is the total cash flow that I have across my entire portfolio, and include your home in that, because your home is access to capital that could be working for you. It's very lazy. It's the laziest equity you've got. And take the time now to do this, actually. If you take the return you're receiving in form of cash flow, and you divide that by your total equity across your entire investment portfolio and times it by 100, what do you end up with? All we're looking is what is the return on your investment right now. And so if you're getting a specific return, and this is why I said cash flow, what are you actually receiving back in your pocket, divided by how much capital you've actually got, what your total equity is. Because, and thanks for everyone for sharing, we've got Karen coming through saying 3% as well. So I'd love to know what your actual desired ROI is, and is 3% enough for you? Because when we start looking at it, here's an example, right? If you were simply to reinvest, this is what a lot of you have done. You might have bought a property for $350,000, for example, at a 60% LVR. Well, you'd have a $210,000 mortgage. If you were getting about a 10.4% gross yield, and I've done that to make numbers easy, then you'd be renting it for $700 per week. But the last 5 years, we've seen massive property growth. We haven't seen as big a rental growth, but we've seen massive capital growth. And so 5 years later, that $350,000 property might have doubled. The mortgage has stayed the same and your LVR has shrunk. But the gross yield on it now is only 5.94% rather than 10.4%. So many of you are sitting on properties where you've got massive growth, but they're no longer working as hard as they used to. It's like, imagine you're plowing the field with a horse, and then the horse goes and eats an absolute ton of hay. Now you've got this fat, lazy horse who's not plowing the field as well as it used to be. So you're only getting 60% of the yield that you used to get. So you could, for example, sell the property and reinvest that money into different properties. I got to stop sharing. I don't know why it hates PowerPoint. So if you were to reinvest that capital, you'd end up with about $590,000. And using that as a deposit, a 40% deposit, it would buy you a $1.4 million property. And if you were to come back and reinvest into a 10.4% gross yielding property like you did the first time, well, instead of $800 per week, you'd now be getting nearly $3,000 per week. All by ensuring that your portfolio is working at that 10.4%, or this, we're not even talking about ROI right now. We're talking about ensuring that your portfolio is maintaining the gross yield you desired it to. And then you look at the equity you've got within that portfolio. How much is that actually making for you? And should you maybe be thinking about some of these other investments? Because if you were to take that 590,000 and invest it in something, in this example, 10%, which any of these strategies, and these are strategies I've just taken from IAW, by the way, these are some of the strategies that they teach. At 10% ROI, you would actually be making 60,000, well, 59,000 for all the analyticals out there in passive income, because you've restructured what your investment looks like in order to be focused on your desired ROI. At 15% TORB, which was your desired ROI, or Dale's at 12%, well, 590 times 0.15 is actually closer to $90,000 per year. So it all ultimately comes back to whether you are, back to this, are you actually thinking like an investor? Or are you simply an employee who's focused on collecting houses, holding houses forever because that makes you happy, but you're not actually having them work as hard as they possibly could? Because to be an investor means getting the best return you possibly can on your money, making your money work as hard as it possibly can so that you don't have to.